The scent of dry land, of hearth smoke and brewing ale, still clung to your clothes as you stepped over the gangplank. A deep breath, lungs full of relatively clean air, a body unburdened by chronic ache or fever, firm on solid ground. This was the state of a new recruit, perhaps a runaway, a press-ganged victim, or a desperate soul seeking a new life, a life he could not yet truly comprehend. The vibrant energy of youth, or the hardened resilience of a working man, propelled him forward into the shadowed maw of the waiting ship. But the moment your foot touched the deck, that illusion of robust health, of control, began to dissipate. The ship wasn't a vessel of adventure. It was a breathing, groaning, confined world, already fighting against the very life it carried. The air shifted immediately, thick and heavy, laden with the stench of brine, of tar, of stale timber, and, most profoundly, of unwashed bodies. Dozens of men, living, eating, sleeping, and dying in close proximity, each a silent vector of unseen threats. Below decks, the environment pressed in. Every plank, every beam wept with dampness. The air hung stagnant, thick with the exhalations of men, the foul breath of the bilge water sloshing beneath the floorboards, and the pervasive reek of sweat and human waste. Your boots, once dry, now felt cool and slick on the perpetually damp wood. Even at anchor, the vessel shifted, a subtle, ceaseless motion that unsettled the inner ear, a prelude to the violent pitches and rolls to come. This was the hidden enemy, the environment itself. It was the microscopic life thriving in the stagnant water casks, in the dark corners where rats nested, in the very air breathed in the cramped, ill-ventilated sleeping berths. There was no escape. Your skin, once dry and clean, now felt perpetually sticky with the ship's damp breath. Your clothes, no matter how recently mended, absorbed the pervasive grime, growing heavier, coarser, and sour with each passing hour. Sleep offered little respite. The constant creak and groan of the hull, the muffled snores of shipmates, the very sway of your hammock became an inescapable rhythm of discomfort. Slowly, insidiously, this environment began its work. The initial vigor faded, replaced by a subtle weariness that no amount of rest seemed to alleviate. A cough might begin, a persistent tickle in the throat, dismissed as a mere irritation. A cut, a scrape, a splinter, once minor concerns on land, now festered in the damp, germ-ridden air, refusing to heal cleanly. Before any named illness struck, before any major injury was sustained, the pirate's body was already engaged in a silent, ceaseless battle, slowly surrendering its hard-won vitality to the unforgiving realities of life at sea. The journey begins, and with it, the body's silent struggle. But what happens when the hidden enemy strikes a specific, agonizing blow? The hidden enemy was scurvy, a silent predator stalking every long voyage. At first, it merely felt like an extension of the pervasive shipboard fatigue. The subtle weariness deepened, evolving into a hollow ache in the bones, a persistent drag that pulled at every muscle. Your limbs, once capable and strong, now felt heavy, reluctant to move, as if weighted down by invisible chains. Joint pain, a dull, throbbing protest, settled into knees and elbows, making every step, every lift, every climb up the pitching deck a conscious act of will, a small battle won against your own failing body. Then came the more gruesome, undeniable signs. The once firm flesh of your gums began to recede, turning a sickly, bruised purple, soft and spongy to the touch. The slightest pressure, a morsel of hardtack, a hasty swipe of the tongue, would unleash a metallic bloom of blood in your mouth, staining teeth and tongue. The taste of it, coppery and warm, was a constant, unpleasant companion. Teeth, once anchored securely, now felt loose, wobbly in their decaying sockets, making the already meager and often rock-hard ship's rations an agonizing challenge to chew. Some men simply ceased to eat, unable to bear the pain, only hastening their decline. But the rot was not confined to the mouth. Skin, once resilient, grew pale and dry, developing strange dark lesions, especially on the legs. Old scars, long healed, would sometimes weep anew, reopening as if the body itself was unraveling. The slightest bump, the most minor bruise, would blossom into an ugly, spreading ecchymosis, a testament to the internal bleeding that silently devoured the body's strength. You would catch the faint, sweetish stench of decay, not just from the bilge, but from your own breath, a putrid aroma that clung to you no matter how much you rinsed your mouth with brackish water. It was the smell of slow, eternal death. Despair was a constant companion, heavier than any anchor. As the body weakened, so too did the mind. A thick fog settled behind the eyes, dimming the world to a gray, hopeless blur. Thoughts became sluggish, words struggled to form, and the simplest tasks required immense concentration. You'd sit, staring blankly, watching the endless horizon, the sea a monotonous expanse, feeling your very essence drain away. There was no cure on board, only a grim, shared ignorance. Some swore by vinegar, others by onions, a few by stale beer, or the bitter taste of chewing a bit of pine tar. But none of it worked. You watched as strong men withered, their faces gaunt, their eyes vacant, and knew that the same fate awaited you, a slow, inevitable dismantling. You understood with a chilling clarity that you were slowly rotting from the inside out, powerless to stop it. But scurvy was only one of the many specters haunting the lower decks. Far more sudden and equally deadly were the fevers that swept through a ship like a phantom. One moment you might be hauling rope, feeling only the familiar weariness, and the next a shiver would seize your bones, violent and uncontrollable, rattling your teeth. This was no ordinary chill, but a cold from deep within your marrow, quickly replaced by a fire blazing through your veins. A splitting headache hammered at your temples, a drumbeat of agony that echoed with every roll of the ship. This was no slow rot, no creeping decay like scurvy. This was an invasion. If you had called at a tropical port, it might be the dreaded yellow jack. Its insidious poison would turn your skin a sickly, jaundiced yellow, your eyes bloodshot, your liver a dull ache. The fever would mount, burning you from the inside, until even the touch of a damp cloth felt like searing iron. Your mind would fray, reality blurring into hallucination. You'd see shapes in the dark, hear whispers in the wind, lost in a delirium that offered no escape from the furnace of your own body. Or perhaps it was the flux, the bloody dysentery, a torment that gripped your gut with an iron fist, twisting and tearing. The ceaseless, agonizing urge to evacuate, a desperate emptying that left you weak and trembling. Each spasm a knife in your belly, each wave of dizziness leaving you gasping, your throat parched, your tongue thick and furred. Dehydration became a desperate thirst, a craving for fresh water that the meager ship's stores could barely satisfy, often too warm or brackish to truly quench. The sick berth, if such a luxury existed, offered no comfort. A cramped, airless space, thick with the stench of sickness, vomit, excrement, unwashed bodies, and the cloying sweetness of decay. You'd lie there, too weak to move, listening to the groans and moans of other men, their ragged breaths and strangled cries. Each sound a cruel mirror, amplifying your isolation. Clammy sheets stuck to your burning skin, providing no relief. You were utterly alone within your failing body, drifting, the world reduced to the harsh rhythm of pain and the distant creak of timbers. Survival felt less like a battle, more like a slow giving way to the inevitable. If illness didn't claim you, the violent life of a pirate might. For a body weakened by fever, a simple accident or a moment of battle could unleash a whole new kind of horror. If fever didn't claim you, a sudden twist of fate, a slip on a wet deck, or the brutal chaos of battle might. A body already weakened by sickness became a brittle thing, less able to withstand the shock, the impact, the sudden violence of a pirate's life. Consider the injuries. A musket ball, fired at close range, didn't just pierce. It tore, ripped, and shattered, carrying fragments of cloth and whatever else lay in its path deep into the flesh, creating a jagged, festering cavern. A saber cut, though seemingly clean in its initial slice, could go deep, severing muscle and tendon, opening a gash that bled torrentially, staining the deck dark red, its edges already prone to infection from the unsanitary blade. Even the ship itself, in the fury of a storm, became a weapon, flinging a man against a mast, snapping a limb like kindling, or crushing bone between shifting timbers. And then there were the splinters from cannon fire, not just direct hits, but the explosive force that sent wooden shards and hot metal flying, embedding deep, leaving ragged, agonizing wounds that festered unseen beneath the skin. The immediate shock, the blinding pain, the rush of adrenaline quickly gave way to a cold, nauseating dread. On board, the surgeon awaited, often more barber than doctor, his knowledge a patchwork of crude experience and ancient, often superstitious lore. His tools were few and seldom clean. A dull saw, a crude probe, a collection of knives honed for other purposes. Imagine the sheer terror when his verdict was rendered. It must come off. No gentle soothing, no anesthetic beyond a swig of foul rum that barely dulled the edges of the mind, or perhaps a leather strap to bite down on. Just the raw, searing agony as the cold steel bit into your flesh, the rough hands holding you down, the gritted teeth, the sound, the truly unforgettable sound of the saw grating against bone, a high-pitched shriek that vibrated through your very skeleton, punctuated by your own strangled cries. The spurt of hot blood, the sickening thud as the severed limb dropped into a bucket. And then, after the ordeal, came the insidious creeping dread. Infection. Unseen, unspoken, but universally feared. The wound, hastily bound with unsterile cloth, would darken, swell, begin to ooze a foul-smelling liquid. The flesh around it would blacken, cold to the touch, a telltale sign of gangrene setting in. A new, consuming fever would burn through you as the poison spread through your veins, turning the initial agony into a slow, certain demise. No one understood why, only that it happened, swiftly and relentlessly, transforming the initial wound into a death sentence. Such agony, whether from illness or injury, left more than physical scars. It etched itself into the very soul, shaping the pirate's outlook on life and death. The constant, gnawing presence of pain and decay, the unremitting damp chill and the stench of sick bodies, these were the unseen instruments that shaped the pirate's mind, perhaps even more profoundly than the whip or the saber. Every cough from a bunkmate, every feverish moan, every new ulcer appearing on a leg, served as a grim reminder of your own precarious hold on life. The air itself seemed thick with contagion, a silent predator stalking the cramped decks. You learned to measure time not by sunsets, but by the dwindling numbers of familiar faces around the communal mess, the sudden emptiness in a bunk that only days before had held a living, breathing man. The grief was a dull, constant ache, rarely given voice, but deeply felt. Each lost shipmate was a mirror reflecting your own inevitable fate, a premonition of the cold anonymity that awaited you. Survival, you learned, was less about skill or strength, and more about a cruel, indifferent lottery. Did the fever find your bunkmate instead of you? Was the splinter from the cannonball just a few inches to the left, sparing your leg? This understanding bred a profound fatalism, a shrug of the shoulders in the face of the overwhelming odds. Why fret over tomorrow when tomorrow might bring a swift fever, a crushing wave, or a surgeon's bone saw. This fatalism often manifested as a bleak gallows humor, a mordant wit that found laughter in the very jaws of death. Jokes about which body part would be next to ache, or who would be the next to go ashore, a euphemism for being buried at sea, were common currency, a desperate attempt to wield some small control over a destiny that had none. For some, this fatalism spiraled into a weary resignation, a desperate longing for the ordeal to simply end, a silent prayer for the quick release that a sudden illness or a well-aimed shot might provide. For others, it hardened into a grim, unyielding determination, an animalistic will to cling to every breath, to outlast the sickness, to defy the sea itself. When death inevitably came, often silently in the night, or with a sudden, final gasp, the ritual was swift and stark. The body, stripped of anything useful, would be sewn into its canvas shroud by the ship's sailmaker. Often a final weight, a cannonball, a bag of sand, would be added at the feet. There was a brief, rough prayer, perhaps a few muttered words from a shipmate, eyes fixed on the horizon, not on the canvas bundle. Then, with a splash that barely disturbed the vast indifference of the ocean, the body was committed to the deep. No coffin, no headstone, just the cold, dark water, rocking the last vestige of a man away into the abyssal currents. The empty bunk, the silence where a voice had been, the lingering ghost of a man's final breath. These were the only memorials. The ship moved on, leaving the dead behind, carrying its burden of the living, each one acutely aware that they too were merely delayed passengers to the same destination. The sea, a source of life and plunder, was also a vast, indifferent graveyard. Yet, even in this constant crucible of suffering, some clung to life, learning brutal lessons about their own fragile existence. The image of the swashbuckling buccaneer, master of his own destiny, is a romantic falsehood, a shimmering mirage cast upon the turbulent waters of history. The harsh reality, etched into the very bones and flesh of these men, was one of profound, inescapable fragility. They were not invincible adventurers, but human vessels, perpetually at war with their own anatomy and the unforgiving environment that paradoxically sustained their illicit trade. Every breath drawn from the damp, stale air of the lower decks, every gulp of putrid, often contaminated water, every scrape of skin against rough, splintered timber was an open invitation to suffering. This constant, relentless siege on the body, from the slow, corrosive gnaw of scurvy to the sudden burning grip of fever, from the searing pain of a shattered limb to the insidious creep of infection, was the true, unromantic constant of their lives beyond the horizon. This pervasive sickness was not just a personal ordeal. It was a systemic weakness that ravaged entire crews. A ship with half its men fever-ridden, racked with dysentery, or crippled by injury, could not fight effectively, could not maintain discipline, and often could not even navigate safely. The notoriously short, often violent lifespan of a pirate was as much determined by the unseen microbes and the unyielding forces of nature as by the broadsides of a Royal Navy frigate. Indeed, disease, more than any cannon, shaped the Golden Age of Piracy, thinning their ranks, dampening their spirits, and shortening their brutal reign. For those who somehow survived, those few who weathered the fevers, dodged the surgeon's saw, and endured the agony of a broken body mending imperfectly, they carried not just the visible scars of battle or accident. They bore an invisible, yet heavier burden, an indelible memory of suffering that etched itself into their very souls. The phantom ache in a limb long since healed, the metallic tang of blood in a waking memory, the putrid smell of gangrene that would forever cling to the corners of their minds. This brutal education in mortality, this intimate acquaintance with pain and loss, defined their existence. It stripped away any illusion of glory, replacing it with a grim, fatalistic understanding of life's precarious hold. Each sunrise was a small, unexpected victory against overwhelming odds, a fragile hold indeed upon a fleeting existence marked by constant struggle. The journey continues, but the echoes of pain, the whispers of fever, and the ghosts of lost shipmates remain a constant reminder of the true cost of a life beyond the horizon.